I always assumed I got along well enough with my in-laws, or at least that they tolerated me. My wife, Rachel, kept telling me that her family adored me, but I never felt genuinely included. Whenever her older sister, Jessica, was around, I felt like a side character at best and a nuisance at worst. She had a knack for spotlighting every perceived flaw in me, from my casual wardrobe to my preference for reading over making small talk. Still, I tried to be polite, hoping time would soften her attitude. That hope, however, turned out to be naive. My position in the family never felt secure. There was always something about me that Jessica found worth belittling. During holiday dinners, she'd roll her eyes if I tried to contribute to conversations about business or travel. If I mentioned an accomplishment at work, she'd change the subject immediately. Yet, Rachel would brush it off, saying Jessica was just blunt with everyone. When the idea of a big family vacation popped up, I honestly thought it might be a chance for Jessica and me to find common ground. I was the one who insisted on paying, hoping to ease tensions. I booked an all-inclusive package at a 5-star resort with swimming pools, dining options, and a spa. It wasn't cheap, but I'd recently received a substantial bonus and wanted to show generosity. We planned a week-long stay and invited Rachel's parents and both of her sisters, including Ariana. Everyone was thrilled when they heard we were covering the cost. I believed that by removing any financial burden, the atmosphere might improve. I didn't realize how Jessica would interpret that gesture. She seemed less grateful and more eager to exploit it, as though my paying gave her license to exclude me. The moment we arrived, Jessica found ways to sideline me. She insisted on organizing a girls-only lunch on the first day, which would have been fine if Ariana's husband, Mark, and Rachel's father weren't also invited at the last minute. They joined, but Jessica explicitly told me there wasn't enough room at the table. I swallowed my frustration, figuring it was just a misunderstanding. Still, it stung to watch them walk off together while I stayed behind. Rachel apologized later, but she didn't seem to comprehend how it felt to be snubbed at my own event that I was bankrolling. Over the next few days, Jessica made it a habit to organize group activities without even telling me. She'd gather everyone to go snorkeling or visit attractions, and I'd only find out after they returned. If I confronted her, she'd claim it was a spur-of-the-moment plan and that she assumed I was too busy. Rachel tried to convince me that Jessica was including me, but that we were missing texts somehow. Yet, every time I checked the family group chat, I saw no mention of these outings. My patience was wearing thin, and I started to suspect this was deliberate. The final straw was when Jessica began taking staged family photos and leaving me out. We'd be chatting in the lobby, and she'd suddenly announce that everyone should line up for a picture. I'd step forward, only for her to wave me away because she claimed she wanted a siblings-only shot. Then she'd add Mark into the frame, ignoring the fact that he wasn't a sibling either. I tried to hide how angry it made me, but Rachel noticed. She kept begging me not to overreact. I thought I was being patient, but I felt a growing desire for payback. That night, I invited Rachel for a walk around the resort. I wanted to lay out my frustrations and get her perspective. She looked torn. She admitted Jessica could be mean, but she also insisted that her sister was just socially awkward. I said I felt humiliated, especially since I was paying for this entire trip. Rachel asked me to wait until the end of the vacation before taking any drastic measures. I agreed, but I told her plainly that I was done being treated like an outsider. I was determined to make Jessica understand the consequences of her behavior. Jessica's next stunt was so petty, it almost made me laugh. She decided to rent a cabana for everyone, conveniently forgetting to include my name on the reservation. When we all arrived, the staff member said the cabana was for a party of 6, not 7. Jessica shrugged and suggested I find a spot by the lounge chairs. That was the moment I resolved that I wasn't going to grin and bear it anymore. I calmly walked away, spent the afternoon by myself, and started forming a plan to ensure Jessica couldn't shrug me off when the final bill came. My plan was I had the funds to cover everyone's base costs, which I'd promised from the start. But I knew Jessica was racking up extras, including spa treatments, room service feasts, and premium add-ons. She assumed I'd just settle everything at checkout because I'd footed the initial bill. What she didn't know was that I'd checked with the hotel staff earlier that day. They confirmed I could split out charges by room and bill individuals separately. The resort's policy allowed separate billing for add-ons if I requested it. That was exactly what I intended to do on our final day. I didn't share my plan with Rachel right away. She knew I was angry, but I wanted plausible deniability if the family tried to claim I'd been scheming all along. I played nice for the rest of the trip, though I continued to be left out of group meals and activities. I made peace with the idea that I'd never belong in Jessica's eyes. The only thing that kept me going was the knowledge that her smug attitude would cost her. Each time she charged another bottle of champagne to her room, I silently tallied the expense and privately grinned. As checkout day approached, I could tell Jessica assumed I'd just whip out my credit card for everything. She made offhand remarks about how generous I was and teased me for being so gullible. Rachel's parents were polite and grateful. Ariana was having fun with Mark, and Rachel tried her best to keep the peace. Jessica, on the other hand, gleefully booked spa appointments and ordered extravagant meals to her suite. I kept my cool and even asked the front desk for an updated breakdown of charges each evening. I kept everything hidden from Jessica, waiting for the perfect moment. On the final morning, everyone packed and met at the lobby for checkout. Jessica had a smirk on her face. She even announced to the group that she was so glad I had covered all the extras, pointing to the receipts in her hand. The front desk clerk recognized me and asked if I was ready to settle the bill. I said I was, but I had a special request. Each room's additional charges should be billed to that occupant. I can still picture Jessica's eyes widening when the clerk started separating her spa charges, room service, and bar tabs. Jessica sputtered, insisting there must be a mistake. She asked why her charges weren't included with the family's overall bill. I calmly explained that I was paying for everyone's base room costs, but individual extras would remain each person's responsibility. She looked at Rachel as if expecting her to intervene. Rachel simply shrugged and said she didn't see any issue. Jessica glared at me, muttering that I was humiliating her. I responded loud enough for everyone to hear that excluding me the entire trip was the real humiliation, and now she could enjoy the benefits of her independence and freedom. The clerk printed out separate bills for each couple. Ariana and Mark didn't have much extra, so they quickly paid and stepped aside. Rachel's parents looked at their modest charges and settled up without complaint. Jessica stood there, flipping through pages of her itemized costs. She had splurged on massages, in-room dining, cocktails, and random gift shop items, all tallied in neat detail. Her face turned red as she realized how much she owed. She tried to argue that she hadn't known the charges wouldn't be covered, but the clerk clearly explained that it was absolutely standard policy unless otherwise stated. Jessica then demanded that I pay, claiming it was unfair to spring this on her at the last minute. I shrugged and said it was no different from the unfairness she'd shown me all vacation. I reminded her of the times she excluded me from photos and activities, openly treating me like I didn't belong. Now I was simply returning the favor by making her responsible for her own indulgences. She tried to guilt-trip Rachel, but Rachel refused to intervene. Jessica had no choice but to produce her credit card, seething with rage as she signed off on every charge. She stormed away from the counter, tears in her eyes, while the rest of us finalized our checkout. Ariana gave me a sympathetic nod, and even Rachel's parents quietly thanked me for still covering their rooms. Rachel looked relieved that I'd finally stood up for myself, although I could tell she was bracing for fallout. Jessica waited outside, pacing furiously. She cornered me as soon as I stepped out, demanding an apology. I told her I wasn't sorry at all, and that I didn't appreciate being treated like a wallet without any respect. That ended the conversation abruptly and permanently. Back home, the family group chat was quiet for a week. Jessica apparently refused to speak to anyone. She posted passive-aggressive messages on social media about fake relatives who betray trust. She conveniently left out how she'd spent the entire vacation pushing me aside. Eventually, Rachel's mother called to say Jessica was whining about being blindsided. I calmly explained my side. Her mother didn't argue, just sighed and said that maybe this would teach Jessica a painful lesson. Rachel was proud I hadn't caved. She admitted that she'd realized how toxic Jessica's behavior was once she saw the final meltdown. Some relatives asked if I regretted causing a permanent rift. I told them I didn't cause it. Jessica did that herself by alienating me for years. I only responded in kind. Paying for someone's vacation doesn't grant them a pass to disrespect me. If she had shown even a modicum of genuine courtesy, I might have let the extra charges slide. But her arrogance sealed the deal. Rachel backed me up, explaining how Jessica had orchestrated my exclusion throughout the trip. Most people understood, and those who didn't probably never will. I refused to lose any sleep over it, ever. Jessica tried to organize a separate family event to complain about my attitude. She invited Rachel's parents and her other siblings, but I wasn't asked to attend. Rachel chose not to go either, which apparently infuriated Jessica even more. Rachel told her she was tired of the constant hostility aimed at me. If Jessica couldn't even manage to invite me to a discussion about my supposed wrongdoing, then there was nothing more to say. That gathering apparently turned into Jessica venting for hours while everyone else quietly looked on. Nobody sided with her. She learned nothing and blamed me anyway. I heard from Ariana that Jessica ranted about how I'd tricked her. She insisted it was very unethical for me to pay for the family's rooms but not her incidentals. Ariana pointed out that none of them expected their extras to be covered. Jessica had simply assumed she was special. That belief led to a humiliating scene at checkout. Ariana also mentioned that their parents fully supported my stance, saying I was generous enough to pay for the main expenses. Beyond that, everyone was on their own. Jessica's sense of entitlement was the real culprit, and she remained deeply bitter. She tried to confront me one last time at a small birthday gathering for Rachel's father. That was the only event we both attended since the vacation. Jessica started off by complaining about how I'd humiliated her. I wasn't in the mood to rehash old drama, so I reminded her that she had excluded me day after day, treated me like I was invisible, and expected me to finance her lavish expenditures. She demanded I apologize, and I refused. I told her I didn't regret a single thing. She stomped away and avoided me for the rest of the night. Rachel and I have settled into a new normal. We still see her parents and Ariana occasionally, but we steer clear of Jessica unless it's a major family function. Even then, we keep our distance. I won't pretend everything is fine now. Jessica still tries to throw snide remarks my way, but I ignore her. If she's waiting for an apology or a sign of regret, she'll be disappointed. She made her bed by treating me like an ATM instead of a brother-in-law. I'm truly done trying to earn her approval or forgiveness. This is the consequence of her actions. Looking back, I'm glad I handled the situation the way I did. There was no point in confronting Jessica with empty threats or dramatic fights. Her behavior had to cost her something more tangible. By refusing to pay for her indulgences, I sent a clear message. I'm not someone to be walked over, especially not when I've shown generosity. Had I covered her charges, she would have continued to see me as a pushover. Now she knows better. I won't forget the disrespect, and I definitely won't forgive it. Her betrayal has painful consequences that she'll always have to live with. I've heard differing opinions on whether I went too far. Some say I should have paid for her extras to keep the peace. Others applaud me for standing my ground. In my mind, it wasn't just about the money, but about respect. If you can't treat your host with basic decency, don't expect a free ride. Jessica thought she could degrade me publicly and still benefit from my generosity. That's not how life works. I don't expect we'll ever be close. She's stubborn, and I'm not someone who forgets a personal slight. I have no regrets about what I did. Rachel occasionally wonders if reconciliation is possible. I tell her that's up to Jessica, but she'd have to start by offering a genuine apology. I'm absolutely not against mending bridges, but I refuse to be the one making amends when I was the wronged party. Jessica remains bitter, convinced I orchestrated the whole thing to embarrass her. In reality, she embarrassed herself by underestimating me. I offered an olive branch at the start by paying for everyone's rooms. She took advantage of it. That's on her, not me. If she never comes around, I'm fully comfortable with that final outcome. Sometimes I wonder how things might have turned out if Jessica had just been truly civil. I wouldn't have minded paying for a few spa sessions and meals if she'd treated me like part of the family. But that wasn't the case, and I wasn't about to reward her cruelty. I'd do the same thing if I had to relive it. People think money makes you a doormat, and Jessica is one of them. She thought I'd roll over to keep the peace. Instead, I made her face the bill she rang up. I feel absolutely no guilt about it whatsoever. Life is truly peaceful without all that drama. Rachel and I focus on our careers and enjoy our time together. We meet Ariana and Mark for genuinely casual dinners, and we spend quality moments with her parents. Jessica is rarely mentioned, and I don't lose anything by her absence. I'm open to civility if she ever drops her vendetta, but I won't chase it. I believe in showing respect to those who respect me, and I won't waste time on those who don't. Jessica made her choices, and I made mine. Our lives continue, with or without each other's approval. To those who think I was too harsh, I say this: generosity should never be mistaken for weakness. I gave Jessica every chance to treat me like family, and she squandered it. She bragged about my money one moment and excluded me the next. Her final bill was a direct result of her own decisions. I have absolutely no sympathy for that kind of entitlement whatsoever. If she'd been decent, none of this would have happened. I'm not going to beg for someone's acceptance while footing their bills. My conscience is completely clear, and I'd do it all again if necessary. Maybe one day Jessica will look back and realize she could have had a better relationship with me if she'd shown even basic respect. Until then, I'm completely content with how things stand. I'm not obligated to forgive her, and I absolutely refuse to pretend everything is okay. The entire fiasco was a wake-up call for me. I don't owe courtesy to those who treat me like dirt. I'm done being the bigger person while someone else walks all over me. Jessica paid for her actions, literally and figuratively. I won't lose another minute fretting about her opinions or her tantrums. This experience taught me a lesson about drawing boundaries. Being generous doesn't mean I absolutely have to accept disrespect. If someone won't appreciate or even acknowledge my efforts, I'm under no obligation to keep giving. Jessica revealed her true colors the moment she refused to treat me like an equal. She reaped the outcome of that choice. I'm completely proud I stood up for myself. That vacation might have started with me feeling excluded, but it ended with Jessica learning a much-needed truth. If you push someone too far, you might inevitably end up footing the bill on your own.